Hey everybody, this is Daniel. I'm a commercial strategist here at Lighthouse. And in this video, I'm going to give you a quick read through of a really good data story that we recently put out. This data story is called Are North American Consumers Changing How They Travel? This is a data story that was written by our content team lead, Jonny. And this article and this data story ties in really well with our recent H1 pricing report that Blake and I recently hosted, and also that Impact of Uncertainty webinar that you guys may have seen as well. In both of those webinars, we touched on the whole concept of the North American traveler, but I wanted to take some time to read through this article and explain what's going on specifically with just North American travelers, because the trends that you're seeing right now in the data are probably here to stay at least through the end of this summer, and they may even continue a bit deeper into the year as well. So right off the bat, in case you don't have time to stick around for the full video, I'm going to give you the key takeaways from Jonny's data story. First is that shorter stays are the new normal for North American travelers. Searches for stays that are 3 nights or less are at a 3-year high, with searches for 1-night stays growing really fast recently, and 4 to 7 night stays are much less popular than 2 or 3 years ago. Secondly, booking windows are shrinking. Searches made within that 28-day window to arrival have risen consistently since 2023. Third, travelers are increasingly seeking last-minute discounts. We'll talk all about this here in a minute, but people are more price conscious and they're waiting longer to book in the hopes that they get a discount. Fourth, economic uncertainty and a weaker job market are the primary cause of all of this, leading to a more cautious consumer. And finally, despite all of this, the desire to travel still remains really strong for that North American consumer. They're not necessarily taking any fewer trips, but the trips that they are taking are shorter and they're more budget conscious. So without further ado, let's get into a little bit more of a deep dive and let's read through this data story together. So this first section here is called the New North American Traveler. Here's what you need to know from this section. Stays of 3 nights or less are what travelers are searching for right now. And searches within that 28-day window are at a 3-year high. Something that's really obvious in both our data and then the other industry reports that we look at is that travelers are more price conscious, but they still want to travel. So when you have that combo, something has to give. And it looks like right now what's giving is that duration of people's stays. So if people want to save money, what's one way you can do that? Well, you can shave off a day of your trip. And Blake and I just talked about a similar kind of global phenomenon that's going on right now in our H1 pricing report. And it's that people are really trying to maximize that travel dollar. So what we're seeing, and this is, keep in mind, more global, but of course it applies to North America, is destinations that are really difficult to get to. So imagine those places that require 2 connecting flights and then a ferry to get to the island. Places like that right now are getting axed from people's wish list, their travel wish lists, because people want to maximize the time that they have. They don't want to waste a bunch of time in transit. People are looking for those direct flights. They want to get to where they're going and then maximize the amount of time that they have there, because it's probably only going to be like a 2 or 3 night stay. The North American traveler right now is typically opting to keep it domestic. And then we also see that folks who are choosing to drive instead of fly, that has also increased. And that is usually a sign of something going on, and that something is, of course, economic uncertainty. So that leads us right into the next section of the blog here. So this is going to be pretty much the least scientific thing that I say all week, but there's the feel-good economy and there's the not-so-feel-good economy. And we all know when we're in that feel-good economy, right? So what does travel look like when we're in a feel-good economy? Well, you take more chances, right? You stay for longer. Maybe you're not so afraid to ask for 10 or 11 days of PTO. Or maybe you go really far off the beaten path and you go on an awesome excursion in Southeast Asia that you saw your favorite influencer doing on Instagram, and you stay in independent hotels and you spend more. These are things that you do in a feel-good economy. Right now, I would say we are more in an economy where you're maybe asking your boss, hey, is it okay if I take off Friday and do a 3-day weekend? And maybe you just do a quick little staycation one state over or something like that. You don't necessarily want to rock the boat. You know, we're in much more of a, what you would call like a slack labor market. And in general, you're more likely to just be very budget conscious. And who knows, maybe you even go old school and you just decide to road trip it instead of fly. So in the data story, Jonny pulls in this really good article from Reuters, which notes that summer travel demand had softened compared to 2024 due to macroeconomic conditions. So there's a couple of little blurbs in this article that caught my eye. The first one came from the Southwest CEO when he said that it's very clear that consumers are waiting to make decisions, including for the summer. Also, too, U.S. summer flight bookings are down 10% year over year, even though airfares have dropped. So the airfares are more attractive and people still aren't even booking them. So let's talk about how length of stay patterns are shifting in this more uncertain economic environment. So here's something interesting. In January of 2023, about 33% of hotel searches were for one-night stays. 2 years later, in January of this year, 2025, that had grown to 39.2%. Now, where it really takes off is the summer of this year. If you look at August of 2025, searches for one-night stays have hit 48.1%. Yes, you heard right. That means that almost half of all searches for hotel stays are only for one night. And if you look at this chart that's up on the screen, we could just throw a trend line on this and you can kind of see where things are headed. Now, obviously at some point, there's gotta be an upper limit, right? We can't all just be searching for one-night stays all the time. Doesn't really make sense. But I would be very curious to see if at some point this passes 50%, because I'm not sure if that has ever happened before. So if the share of one-night stays is growing, that means that these other length of stay searches, they have to be getting clobbered, right? So let's take a look at how the length of stay one searches line up versus other length of stay searches. And there's one that really stands out as kind of like the big loser. Way fewer people are searching length of stay 4 to 7, and it's just been dropping consistently since 2023. So this signals to me that those medium-term lengths of stay, that 4 to 7 night vacation, is probably a lot less popular. And what I think is going on is people are probably throughout the year, they're sneaking in multiple little quick weekend staycations. Think 1, 2, 3 night stays. Okay, so what data signals do we have that travelers are indeed a bit more budget conscious right now in summer of 2025? Another source that I've been looking at super closely is this Deloitte Summer 25 travel report. And here we can see that the number of people that are citing their reason for not traveling this year is that they can't afford it. So from March to April, that number rose from 35% up to 38%. And then in addition to that, we have more folks that are opting for a road trip instead of flying. And you can also add to that some of our findings here at Lighthouse from our Impact of Uncertainty webinar, which was that non-gateway cities, aka those cities that are not very reliant on that international long-haul inbound tourist, these are the markets that are actually doing okay right now. Markets like Greenville, South Carolina, and Bakersfield, California. These were the markets that were most insulated, whereas other markets that were, Los Angeles or Seattle or Miami, markets like that really just rely on that international inbound, they were not doing as well with their pricing. So let's talk about the booking window, because this can be very telling as to the psychology of what's going on with North American travel right now. North American travelers are booking their stays way, way closer to arrival. In fact, stays made within the 28-day window now account for over 50% of hotel searches in North America. For reference, in 2023, this was only 35%. That is a huge, huge increase in the amount of people booking super last minute. And if we look at it another way, we can compare that 0 to 28-day booking window with the 29 plus booking window, and it's very, very stark. So what's going on when we compare these two charts? If you're a hotelier, you probably won't like this one, but travelers are essentially holding out for the best deal possible. From what I can tell, it seems to be working, because in our latest H1 pricing report, we did see a lot of downward pressure on rates. So if you do wait around for a deal right now, there is a pretty good chance you're going to get one. And Jonny sums it up really well with this quote here in the data story. This persistent shift is a clear indication of consumer apprehension. Travelers are less willing to commit to long-term plans in an uncertain environment and are instead holding out for last-minute deals. So we get to the end here. What are the implications for our North American hoteliers that may be watching this? North American travelers are indeed less assured about their economic outlook, resulting in lower consumer confidence, but intent to travel is still at a 4-year high. So, North American travelers are traveling just as much as they were before, if not even more, but these are all shorter trips, booked much more last minute, and that traveler is much more price sensitive. So my takeaway for you is, if we're in this kind of weird, uncertain travel environment where things are very unpredictable, this is when it's a really good time to use whatever market intelligence tools that you may have, especially for some of that forward-looking search intent and then forward-looking demand data. Because what you can do is, you may have a weekend coming up 2 or 3 weekends from now. It does not look like it's going to be a good weekend. It may look soft, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this turns into a sellout weekend. If you have those kind of tools, what it can enable you to do is actually maximize on that demand, because you can see those search trends. Even if it's just a few days out, what'll happen is you at least can be that first mover and push rate or lower rate or implement some kind of new strategy or promotion quicker than other competitors can. So this has been a quick read through of this awesome data story called Are North American Consumers Changing How They Travel? I hope that you enjoyed this data story and stay tuned for future read throughs. Thank you.